Welcome to the Afterglow podcast, a space to practice Yoga Nidra informed by the ideas of Carl Jung and internal family systems. Each week we will work on a different life theme, giving us the opportunity to discover vast inner landscapes, sitting with all that life has to offer as we explore who we are. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. Welcome. Today I'll be talking about how to sink our awareness into the body. We'll be moving our attention through each part, giving it love and appreciation for all that it does. And we'll be working specifically this week on the nervous system, doing a simple but highly effective method to soothe the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. And this will help us cope with the consistent onslaught of external pressures, of stimulation from the outer world, whether it's from situations in our own personal lives or things coming through from the collective. This is a tool you can use again and again to keep coming back to a state of peace and having a healthy nervous system responding consciously to the outer world. Most of us have a good working knowledge of the nervous system, so I'll just do a light refresh of the basics to remind us of the difference between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system responds to acute stresses, also known as the fight or flight response. It signals to the brain to pump adrenaline and cortisol into our system, while temporarily shutting off energy to things like digestion. It allows us access to increased strength and speed and ability to navigate or take in information rapidly. Once the external stressor has been dealt with, the sympathetic nervous system will hand regular functioning back over to the parasympathetic nervous system. Typically, in a balanced nervous system, the parasympathetic will transfer information throughout the body through neurons. This system supports the everyday at-rest functions of the body, including our digestion, urinary systems, sexual systems, blood circulation, and respiratory systems. Physical trauma can damage our nerve cells, as can many diseases, and the damage can sometimes be permanent. But emotional and psychological trauma can also disrupt the healthy functioning of these autonomic nervous systems, giving us symptoms that we often treat with medications that only mask the symptoms and don't actually remove the core stressor. I will be doing an episode on cerebral palsy because of the particular nature of that disability, but I would like to note that the Yoga Nidra that I will be releasing in a couple of days is suitable for all bodies. Like the vast majority of the Yoga Nidras I design, this one will give you the space to play and meet your body where it is at, listening to anything it wants to tell you and needs of you. So whether you have severe disruption to your nervous system, or if you're operating with little to no symptoms, this Yoga Nidra will give you the opportunity to spend time with your body in a heightened state of appreciation and connection. This Yoga Nidra can be repeated as many times as you like. In fact, the benefits will only increase more and more with repeated use. When I was doing my training, we talk more about the nadis. This is a system of energy known as prana that operates throughout the body, made up of the Ida, Pingala, and the Sushumna. The approach to supporting these systems is much the same as we perceive the parasympathetic and sympathetic responses, but I will just be using the language of the autonomic nervous system today. On nervous systems, Jung had a lot to say. In fact, psychosomatic disorders are essentially the nervous system's response to psychological stress. Jung referred to the nervous system as a way to see the shadow. Jung writes, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well. But one must learn to know oneself in order to know who one is. For what comes after the door is, surprisingly enough, a boundless expanse full of unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine and no thine, no good and no bad. It is the world of water, where all life floats in suspension, where the realm of the sympathetic system, the soul of everything living, begins, where I am indivisibly this and that, where I experience the other in myself, and the other than myself experiences me." Carl Jung, Collected Works, 9I, paragraph 45. In the month of recording this, July 2025, like so many months for the last year, we have all had to sit with the collective grief of a world in chaos that we cannot control. It is difficult to know how to take on these larger-than-life stresses. If we remove ourselves entirely, we stagnate. For we are part of the collective. It is important to sit with the suffering that is nebulous, spans species and borders, is difficult to quantify or define. And yet, we also cannot be inside of the collective, suffering for long periods of time. We each need to find our balance between the individual and the collective, being honest with ourselves when our social justice anger is actually a projection of an internal discomfort we want to avoid having to integrate. Or when we distance ourselves from the state of the world too much out of fear that it will consume us. This can indicate an internal strengthening is required so that we can understand where we begin and the collective ends. This work of the nervous system reveals the weight we carry and where the focus needs to be to unclip ourselves while still maintaining a connection. For any who are new to Jung, I'll outline the collective unconscious, and even for those familiar, it might help you see the nervous system in a new light. The collective unconscious, a concept from Jung, is a broad and foundational idea to his work. It is the playground he gave us for understanding archetypes. The collective unconscious spans cultural and geographical influence. It goes deep back in time, the psyche continuing through our evolution from fish to ancient primates. The collective unconscious surrounds our personal unconscious, and it is a vital part of individuation for each of us to balance the tension of the conscious and the unconscious. Shapes and descriptions of archetypes are easily understood by all. The warrior, the trickster, the divine mother, the king. There isn't really an end to the list, but there tend to be several dozen familiar ones that appear frequently in mythology and stories, religions, and even within our own family systems and friendships. when we overly identify with one of many of these archetypes, Jungians may say this person is possessed by the archetype of the martyr, for example, implying that the person has wrapped themselves in the costume of an archetype as a way to perhaps avoid self-discovery, as a way to protect themselves, maybe as a way to find relevance or receive kindness within their community. Through inner work and therapy, we can find these patterns of behavior within us and begin to separate out from them, embracing their natural opposite, finding more balance in the tension between these opposites. It is not to say that archetypes are bad. They are simply a framework to name the shape of something, a set of behaviors or characteristics. There are modern archetypes, especially as people grapple with the constant changes in technology and the way that our culture shifts in response to it. There are archetypes that still ultimately resemble ancient shapes, yet modern language is necessary to remind us that we are dealing with the unknown. Our brains have evolved with parts of it being nicknamed the lizard brain to remind us that there is ancient coding in us, helping us recognize the shape of a snake in the grass. That will trigger our sympathetic nervous system to respond. Jung writes, just as man has a body which is no different in principle from that of an animal, so also his psychology has a whole series of lower stories in which the spectres from humanity's past epochs still dwell. When the animal souls from the age of Pithecanthropus and the hominids, then the psyche of the cold-blooded Saurians, and deepest down of all, the transcendental mystery and paradox of the sympathetic and parasympathetic psychoid systems. Carl Jung, Collected Works, 14, paragraph 279. Jung is making the point that for all of the instincts that we have collected over millennia of evolution, so too do we collect these incredible shapes of these archetypes. These forces impact our nervous systems. Our nervous systems understand the images that we are seeing on the TV screens. They understand the symbols being represented through the dramatic headlines in the news. And it does not understand the difference between an inefficient, unsupportive employer and an antagonist wanting to harm us. The work of the nervous system and the work of archetypes is very interlaced in this way. It doesn't have to be intimidating or overwhelming. I'm giving far more context than is necessary to do this Yoga Nidra. But I think it is definitely something that we could all do with being slightly more aware of and giving a bit more respect to the ancient nature of aspects of the unconscious mind, of the collective unconscious mind. This part of us that surrounds our personal unconscious, this force that cannot tell the difference between these things. It requires tending to, it requires mitigation so that we are able to maintain healthy psyches and healthy nervous systems. I'll share an experience that I had that is relevant to this work. For all of my adult life, I had a mild to moderate state of tension in my body, either in my jaw or my muscles, around my solar plexus. Sometimes I'd find my breathing was shallow, I'd have a feeling of constriction. And I was so used to this feeling that it did not occur to me that it was a symptom. I guess I just thought that that was what it felt like to be in my body. In 2018, I stopped being able to walk. It happened slowly at first, and then all of a sudden, I was experiencing extreme external stress from a job where I was working 80 to 90 hours a week. I was enjoying the work so much so that I ignored all of the warning signs, and I felt inflated by the importance of my own work and the passion and the joys that I had. Of course, that wasn't tenable, and I left the job and chose to be unemployed for a while. But I had not created any internal support structure. I had no tools or language to understand that my inability to walk was psychosomatic. In fact, I was convinced it was mold or that I had a brain tumor, despite having learned about psychosomatic stress responses. When it was happening to me, my sympathetic nervous system was activated so often that I could not consider that I was experiencing something that was essentially all in my head. I was convinced that there was some external force, or that I was going to be diagnosed with some kind of terminal illness. Eventually, I couldn't live alone, unable to stand for more than a few minutes at a time. Never mind not being able to walk, I couldn't drive, I couldn't cook, I couldn't shower standing up. What it felt like to be in that state was this. I would feel somewhat normal for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden it felt as though I was drugged. The whole floor would swim and my limbs would feel unbelievably weak, as though I simply could not hold myself up. I felt perpetually as though I was about to fall off a cliff any second. But the cliff was somehow inside of my mind. I could feel consistently the shape and the looming threat of falling off some internal cliff. And I'd had many experiences of this for years before I stopped being able to walk, but they were so sporadic that I didn't take them seriously. At the worst of my inability to walk, I once caught an Uber to drive me 200 meters. I couldn't make it up 3 or 4 steps without support. As a hyper-independent person, this was very difficult. It was very difficult to accept help as well. And finally, I went to a Jungian psychoanalyst who was also a psychiatrist, and I told him that I had a plan to get an MRI. He listened to my ideas and then calmly explained to me how generalized anxiety affects the body, how the mind under extreme and chronic stress speaks through the body. The communications get louder and louder the longer we ignore them. He suggested I try antidepressants and see if my symptoms go away. If they didn't, he agreed that I should get an MRI. But he felt confident that it was a much easier way to diagnose the cause of my inability to walk for me to take these antidepressants. At the time, I was very anti-allopathic medicine. And while I still have a conservative approach to taking over-the-counter medications or prescription medications, my staunch resistance at the time conceded it was worth trying. And I now have a much greater respect for modern medicine because my symptoms disappeared overnight. After nearly 6 months of not being able to walk, all of that drowning, all of the swimming, struggling to function, struggling to take care of myself, living on the edge, my entire body holding myself back from some imagined cliff I was about to fall off of for 6 months straight without stop, just went away. It took about, say overnight, I mean it took about maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but the relief was overnight. I would say that I was 40 to 50% better within the first 2 days. Perhaps I'm misremembering, but it was very rapid. And definitely by the end of the first month, I was functioning like normal. Now, of course, a bad psychiatrist, in my opinion, will leave you with a prescription and not worry about what else is going on that's causing these symptoms. And I'm not talking about people with permanent psychosis or even consistent patterns of psychosis. I'm talking about people who go through periods of depression or anxiety, or having suppressed their anxiety like I had to the point where I did not even realize I was so anxious, and I was completely convinced that I had some physical condition. Nor am I saying that all physical conditions are psychosomatic, and I trust that each person will find the limits and the shapes to their own psychosomatic responses and their own health. But I can say with absolute certainty that when the nervous system shuts down, it shuts down hard. It's really, really difficult to get it back on track, because just taking the antidepressants didn't fix the problem. I still had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what it was that was so troubling and so disturbing in my psyche that pushed me to the edge the way it did. And for the vast majority of people, psychosomatic symptoms can be temporarily alleviated with antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, smoking weed, drinking alcohol. But we still need to attend to our inner work. That alleviation is just a way to mask a symptom. It is not the same as sitting with ourselves, paying attention to the subtle aspects of our minds and bodies and how they want to communicate with us. In time, I was able to permanently go off the antidepressants, and now I have an increased respect for the true power of anxiety, its ability to convince me so completely that I was suffering from some physical problem that had nothing to do with my unconscious mind. And it was so powerful that it was able to stop my entire life in its tracks completely and brutally demanding my attention. It is only through inner work that I've been able to demystify this previously perplexing relationship between mind and body. What remains beneath the surface of our conscious minds lives through the body. So now, as we prepare for the Yoga Nidra in a few days, I'm going to just give a quick explanation of how the body appreciation will work. So, this particular body appreciation, as you know, will focus on the nervous system. Like most body appreciations, the actual Yoga Nidra will be an extension of one of the steps that I use when I'm guiding people into the state of Yoga Nidra, which is the mental rotation of the body parts. So we will do the same mental rotation, but instead of moving on into a story, scenario, or something else, we'll be focusing continuously on the body, but just deepening our awareness, taking it to the layer that is the nervous system. And we'll be creating a lot of space for healing and soothing of the parasympathetic nervous system, of the sympathetic nervous system, and leaving you feeling completely relaxed and wonderful at the end of it. But before the Yoga Nidra ends, I will give you some time to ask questions and communicate directly with your nervous system so that you can see what it needs you to know, what it wants you to focus on. It doesn't have to be as scary and daunting. My story is very intense, and obviously not everyone will have such a thing. It could be something like do more exercise, or it could be something like it's really important to put more boundaries between you and this person. But it will be a very safe space. And this is the time to sit gently with ourselves, see what the nervous system wants of us. But that is not the question that I want you to focus on in the next couple of days. I want you to consider how your body feels generally, where the energy rests in your body when you're sitting on the couch, making dinner, brushing your teeth. How does your body feel when you first wake up? There is no point in judging what you see. Simply observe. And if you are up for it, when you do observe, whatever it is that you observe, say an internal thank you to your body for letting you know. That is all. I'll leave you with this quote from Jung. Our unconscious is surely located in the body, and you mustn't think this is a contradiction to the statement I usually make, that the collective unconscious is everywhere. For if you could put yourself into your sympathetic system, you would know what sympathy is. You would understand why the nervous system is called sympathetic. Carl Jung, Zarathustra Seminar, pages 749 to 751. Thank you for joining us for this weekly companion episode. It really does add to the experience that you will have in Yoga Nidra. The Yoga Nidra will be uploaded in a few days, giving you time to reflect on the questions that I've asked you. Please subscribe to receive notifications for this new Yoga Nidra episode, as well as for future ones. Thank you for adding your light and kindness to the world, and for doing this important inner work. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. See you soon.